What's up, Chase Oaks? So good to spend this weekend with y'all. Good to see everyone. Hey, isn't it awesome that Jeff is back from his study break? I mean, that is so cool. It's kind of like Daddy's home. I mean, depending on which life stage I was in, that's a good or a bad thing. I don't know, but it was so good to see him back. And usually we did a swap-a-roo today because usually I'm the one hosting, he's the one preaching, so you get me today. But next week, Jeff will be back, and he's overloading, as you can tell. Like he's full. He wants to preach. Hey, man, I just want to give a quick shout-out to the newly named Woodbridge campus in the Wiley-Saxon area, Sloan Creek in the Fairview-Allen area, and Espanol meets here at 1 o'clock on Sundays in the 201 building. Those of you guys watching online, and of course, my awesome Legacy campus here in Plano. Yes, welcome. I may be a little partial, but, it's all good. Hey, I'm excited to be one of the closers of our awesome series, Born to be Wild, where we've been taking a look at some obscure, hidden characters in the Bible who God chose to be his heroes. It's really interesting because I think most of us could relate to most of these characters because they had messy lives, they were far from perfect. Yet what's so exciting is that God calls each and every single one of us into a life to be one of his heroes that live a life bigger than ourselves, to be part of his great mission, regardless of your past or present circumstances. And how awesome is that? Now, I grew up in California, and ever since I was a little kid, maybe surrounded by Hollywood and all that kind of stuff, I dreamt to be a star one day. I just wanted to be. And I guess I just was a minority of minorities. I was short. I was this little scrawny kid, and I just wanted to be someone. And so when I went to college, well, check this out.
Pacifier. Lord heavens, if the pacifier ain't struck again. And in my pub.
You waited until we were gone, and then you poured half a canister of sugar into the chowder. You deliberately ruined it.
I never touched the chowder.
Now, it was really quick, so just in case some of you guys missed it, let's check out a screenshot. Oh, man. That's so dorky. Anyways, anyone remember that episode, The Pacifier in Days of Our Lives? Oh, my gosh. You guys are the first ones. Okay, I think you're lying. Anyways. I was so obscure and hidden, unless you're looking for it. I mean, you don't notice extras, right? I mean, we just don't even appear on the credits. I mean, at least, if they did, what would they put down? Like, Peter Park, token Asian, and, in a pink shirt. Like, what would they say? Talk about hidden, obscure characters. To this day, no one has yet to come up to me off the streets and say, were you that one extra on a pink shirt in that one picnic episode? Oh my gosh, you made the episode come to life. Every time you show up on Days of Our Lives, oh my gosh, that episode is just so much better. No one has yet to come up to me to say that. I don't know. And by the way, there's no such thing as Emmys for extras, and I don't know why. So that's on TV. But what about real life? Do some of us feel like our life feels a little hidden, obscure, maybe not as significant? Well, the good news is God is in the business of making heroes out of us, regardless of how we feel about ourselves. See, we're going to take another look at a character in the Bible who is pretty obscure and hidden, and one of the least likely candidates for God to make into a hero. So we can find that person in Joshua chapter 2, which is the 6th book in the Bible, in the Old Testament. But before we get there, let me give you a little backdrop. So prior to chapter 2, 40 years back, let's rewind 40 years, God delivered the Israelites from Pharaoh's hand, led by Moses. And of course, Pharaoh's army started chasing after them. They dead end at the Red Sea, and then God actually opens up the Red Sea. And then as they pass through, the Pharaoh's army kind of chases after them and gets swallowed up by the Red Sea. They continue to wander, and then Moses ends up on Mount Sinai, brings back the 10 Commandments. I mean, just all these epic things going on. But they wander for 40 years. Now, during this time, God, where were they headed? God promised them this place called the Promised Land, the land of milk and honey, which is actually today's modern-day Israel. But the first generation messed up. Because of their disobedience and their lack of faith, they were no longer allowed to enter the promised land, except for two guys, Joshua and Caleb, because there's no one else that had faith like they did. Now, the rest of the first generation over the 40 years end up dying one by one, including Moses. So now that they're all dead, finally, the scene is set for the second generation of Israelites to enter the promised land. So Joshua 2 begins kind of like a James Bond movie as Joshua sends out spies to scope out the land of the most fortified city in the land called Jericho. Verse 1. Then Joshua secretly sent out 2 spies from the Israelite camp at Acacia Grove. He instructed them, scout out the land on the other side of the Jordan River, especially around Jericho. So the 2 men set out and came to a house of a prostitute named Rahab and stayed there that night. Interesting choice. Why a house of a prostitute? See, as obvious foreigners, Rahab's type of establishment would have easily been an establishment that would welcome foreigners and be a place to find shelter. But I'm sure they passed on the full service option. Verse 2, but someone told the king of Jericho, some Israelites have come here tonight to spy out the land. So the king of Jericho sent orders to Rahab, bring out the men who have come into your house, for they have come here to spy out the whole land. See, if I can't be a real actor, at least I could do a little voice acting, but I don't know. It's all good. It helps us to kind of read the Bible with more color. I don't know. So first of all, here we have these 2 spies, and it's only the first night, and they're already exposed. Not doing a good job here, 007s. So what Rahab does next will either spell the doom of these 2 spies and she be elevated as a hero, or if she hides the spies, then she is risking her life. So let's see how she handles the situation. Verse 4, Rahab had hidden the 2 men, but she replied, yes, the men were here earlier, but I didn't know where they're from. They left the town at dusk and as the gates were about to close. I don't know where they went, but if you hurry, you could probably catch up with them. And then notice here on the NLT version, there's parentheses, so it almost sounds like you want to whisper. Actually, she had taken them up to the roof and hidden them beneath bundles of flax she had laid out. Shh, don't tell anyone. As if we say it too loud, like this, the men are going to hear it or something. Now, if I was in her shoes, I probably would have buckled under that pressure. Back in high school, I started hanging around the wrong crowd. And they taught me something very interesting called ditching, which is actually really fun at first. I mean, we can leave whenever we want. We can go wherever we want because my friend had a car. We could do whatever we want. So one day, I went to the same office lady for the 5th time in 2 weeks to turn in my medical release form that I had an appointment. I mean, come on. I had dental issues, vision issues. I had gout. I had all these different things going on. So, give a brother a break. So, but this time around, she decided to confirm with my dad, so she started dialing his work number. At that moment, I started panicking. I was calculating in my head, okay, what's the least worst scenario? Okay, if my dad gets interrupted in the middle of work, he gets embarrassed and he gets all mad and he bruised for several hours until he comes home, or should I just disclose him the bad news after he eats so he's less irritable and all that kind of stuff? And so at that moment, right as she was about to dial, see, back in the 80s, it was like this. Back when she was about to dial the final number, I said, okay. I forged my dad's signature. And to my amazement, she did not look shocked at all. Amazing. So I end up getting suspended, which actually ends up on your permanent transcripts. And I realized later on, I learned that if I just left and just ditched without forgery, I would have just got detention, which does not go on your transcripts. No wonder I didn't get into Harvard. Oh. Okay, so let's continue the story. So now that Rahab kind of, said all that to the king's men. So the king's men went looking for the spies along the road leading to the shallow crossings of the Jordan River. As soon as the king's men had left, the gate of Jericho was shut. Rahab full-on deceives the king's men, and they buy it. I mean, talk about an actress. She's the one that deserves an Emmy. I almost said some other thing too, but anyway, sorry, an Emmy. I mean, the men were probably convinced and had no reason to believe why Rahab would betray her king and her own people. But here is where we discover, why in the world would Rahab risk her own life and hide the spies? Verse 8, before the spies went to sleep that night, Rahab went up to the roof to talk with them. I know the Lord has given you this land, she told them. We are all afraid of you. Everyone in this land is living in terror. For we have heard how the Lord made a dry path for you through the Red Sea when you left Egypt. And we know what you did to Sihon and Og, the two Amorite kings east of the Jordan River, whose people you completely destroyed. No wonder our hearts have melted in fear. No one has the courage to fight after hearing such things. For the Lord your God is the supreme God of the heavens above and the earth below. See, Rahab had faith. She had faith that the God of the Israelites was the supreme God. See, the people in Jericho, they were polytheistic, so they believed in many gods. They had faith in many different gods, but none of their gods compared to the God of the Israelites. Now, we also discover that Rahab not only had faith in the existence of God, but also in the promises of God that he will indeed give this land to his people. So what's so awesome about faith is that there's no prerequisites. I mean, here we have a woman whose lifestyle and career path are one of the worst that anyone could imagine. I mean, she probably didn't grow up as a little girl saying, one day I want to be a ballerina, then a princess, and then a prostitute. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it doesn't happen that way. She's never attended church. She's never read her Bible. She's probably never even prayed, and she was still a prostitute. Yet, because of what she heard, she chose faith, a simple faith. Hebrews 11 is considered the hall of faith, where it discloses some biblical studs like Noah and Abraham and Joshua and Moses and Joseph. But it also includes Rahab. In verse 31, it was by faith that Rahab the prostitute was not destroyed with the people in her city, who refused to obey God, for she had given a friendly welcome to the spies. So it's amazing how someone like Rahab, yes, the prostitute, was recognized as one of the heroes of our faith. Yet faith itself is not enough. See, again, Jericho had faith in many gods, but the object of our faith is what makes the difference. See, Rahab had faith in the one and only true living God. Rahab trusted that God is really who he says he is, not out of as a first-hand eyewitness, but merely out of what she heard. See, I love how Chase Oaks is a place we are totally welcome no matter what type of background, no matter where you've been. Whether you're kicking the tires of Christianity all the way to a seasoned Christian veteran and anyone and everyone in between. See, yet this faith, the faith that Rahab had, is the same faith that every single one of us are invited into. A simple faith, believing in our hearts that God wants to save us through his Son, Jesus Christ. That all who believe will be saved. It doesn't matter where we've been, what we've done, what current circumstance we're in. Faith is available now. And there's no better day than today to put your faith in Jesus Christ. So let's continue the story. This is Rahab now speaking to the spies again. Now swear to me by the Lord that you will be kind to me and my family since I have helped you. Give me some guarantee that when Jericho is conquered, you will let me live, along with my father, mother, brothers, and sisters, and all their families. We offer our own lives as a guarantee for your safety, the men agreed. If you don't betray us, we will keep our promise and be kind to you when the Lord gives us the land. See, Rahab's faith was so sure that God was going to give Jericho to them that she was willing to risk her own and her family's lives, hoping that their lives would be spared by the one and true only God and his people. Let's continue. Verse 15, then since Rahab's house was built into the town wall, she let them down by a rope through the window. Escape to the hill country, she told them. Hide there for 3 days from the men searching for you. Then when they have returned, you can go on your way. And let's fast forward to verse 23. Then the 2 spies came down from the hill country, crossed the Jordan River, and reported to Joshua all that had happened to them. The Lord has given us the whole land, they said, for all the people in the land are terrified of us. Rahab not only had faith, but she put faith into action. Check out what the book of James in the New Testament says about Rahab. Chapter 2, verse 25. Rahab, the prostitute, there we go again, is another example. She was shown to be right with God by her actions when she hid those messengers and sent them safely away by a different road. Just as the body is dead without breath, so also faith is dead without good works. Now let me clarify for a second. For by grace we have been saved through faith and faith alone, through Christ and Christ alone, and not by works. However, real faith produces good works. When we have faith, we're compelled to act upon it. Let's take a look at a story of a Chase Oaks couple who put faith into action by taking a step away from their past and really looking towards what God promises them for the future.
So ever since I started coming to Chase Oaks, there was a lot of guilt and there was a lot of shame that I was hiding inside due to a traumatic event that happened to me when I was 14. And ever since then, I've been holding on to that. I haven't told anybody about it, not even my parents, and it really ate me up inside. And so I had a really difficult time connecting with people. I had a really difficult time sharing just anything about myself. I always had a mask on.
He didn't talk about his past. He did get very defensive sometimes, and sometimes I was super confused on why something so minimal would set him off, or why his reaction was to things that I didn't feel like that was a natural reaction.
And so we got into Renew, and sooner than I thought, I realized how much I needed to work on myself and how much that event actually caused a lot of pain and a lot of grief and a lot of really issues in my life, and that even affected our marriage. And so the more I opened up, the more I started to realize that I needed other men, and I started I started joining men's ministry here at Chase Oaks. And it was revealed to me that, it's good to have a mentor, somebody that's, gone through life ahead of you and could give you some good wisdom and how to do life. And so I decided to do that, and it was a really, really scary thing because that meant I had to share my story. And it was a story that I haven't told anybody in 20 years. And so I met my mentor, and on the first day, I finally told my story for the first time in 20 years. And all of a sudden, all the guilt and all the shame just came back. And it was very difficult. It was probably one of the hardest things that I had to go through in my life. But it was definitely worth it, because that process of reliving that pain and having to finally talk through it for the first time with somebody, with God in the center of all of that, is where the healing really started.
I was hearing, I also felt like it was time to ask about the past, to work through it, to hear about it, to go past it.
And I totally was not prepared about that. We went out to dinner, and she sat me down and she said, "It's time for you to tell me your secret." And at that moment, I was very scared. 9 years into our marriage, I have been thinking that if I ever told her about what happened to me, she won't accept me for who I am and what had happened to me, and that she would leave me. And so I really prayed about it at that moment, and I just had to trust God that since I've been working through that story with my mentor, that if I told her, that God would take over and would take care of it, and He did. And I told her what happened, and all my fears didn't happen.
Yeah. Through going to Renew, I learned a lot of things, of healthy ways to process it all. And I sat there and I listened, and I still loved him, and he was still the same man that I had married, and his past was his past, and I was there to work through it with him, but it didn't make me love him any less. It actually kind of made me love him more.
So for the first 9 years of our marriage, I spent that whole entire time hiding everything, hiding the past. When I finally let that story go, and as I said, it was like a lot of weight lifted from my chest, and it was like I was a free man. God totally redeemed me from that, and took so much of that pain away, and so that allowed me to be free with that story, and really now I feel so blessed that although that traumatic event really did suck, it was God's story that I'm able to share with somebody, and able to help other men that might have gone through the same thing, or might be struggling with the same guilt and shame that I was going through, and sharing my hope, and sharing the God's redemption in my life, that I was able to get through it, and that life was worth it in the end.
It's just been amazing to see his transformation and see God redeem what he was ashamed of and what was dark, and make it light, and shine it across DFW, I guess, or farther.
Thank you so much, Paul and Kate, for sharing your story. Just like Rahab, Paul took a risk and acted in faith in sharing his story to other individuals, including his wife. See, Paul discovered that we're not defined by our past, that we're never disqualified because of our past. See, God is in the business of making messy, broken people into heroes. God is now using Paul's story to touch thousands, just through this video alone, because Paul took a step of risky faith. See, acting on faith to follow God can be risky. Most of y'all who are visiting for the very first time, you took a risk to come into this new place, to meet these new people. Maybe you're thinking, man, am I gonna see all these weird people forcing me to do all these weird things? I don't know. Hopefully we haven't so far. Or maybe others. God is calling you to stop being hidden or anonymous here at Chase Oaks, and is nudging you to take that next step, to join a group or join a life group, or maybe serve on a team. Maybe you're thinking, well, what if I don't connect with anyone? What if there's nothing that I am able to do? Or is God nudging you to invite that coworker finally to church? But what if he says no, and now he thinks I'm like this Jesus freak? Or maybe there's some heavy issues that God wants you to address. Maybe it's issues with an addiction, or an unhealthy marriage, or an unhealthy relationship, and God is inviting you to take action, to seek intervention, counseling, help, whatever it takes to get better. Faith compels us to action. So let's fast forward to Joshua chapter 6, where the Israelites now march around Jericho once a day for 6 days in silence. And on the seventh day, they march around Jericho 7 times. And on the 7th time, they're ordered to scream and yell and shout and blow the trumpets as loud as they can. And as they do, the walls literally tumble crashing down. Now, Rahab's house, we can infer that it's probably the only one standing, because she and her family's in there. So let's look at verse 22. Meanwhile, Joshua said to the 2 spies, "Keep your promise, and go to the prostitute's house and bring her out along with all her family." The men who had been spies went in and brought out Rahab, her father, her mother, brothers, and all the other relatives who were with her. It was good to be related to Rahab at this moment. They moved her whole family to a safe place near the camp of Israel. Then the Israelites burned the town and everything in it. Only the things made from silver, gold, bronze, or iron were kept for the treasury of the Lord's house. So Joshua spared Rahab, the prostitute, and her relatives who were with her in the house, because she had hidden the spies Joshua sent to Jericho, and she lives among the Israelites to this day. What a story. Yes, Rahab was known for her faith and her faith in action. But all that she's known for And all that she did would have meant nothing if it wasn't for God's grace. See, the word grace can easily be taken for granted here at church because we kind of throw it around here and there. We say it all over. We sing about it. So in order to appreciate grace again, let me compare it with two other attributes of God, justice and mercy. So God is a God of justice, and he demonstrates this by how he carried out justice by destroying all of Jericho. See, the Bible says, for the wages of sin is death. And so Jericho, being this evil, corrupt place, got what they deserved. Justice was served. They were treated fairly. At the same time, God is also a God of mercy. All Rahab wanted was for her and her family to be spared, exempt from God's justice, withheld from being treated fair, and that was granted. And this would have been more than enough for Rahab and her family just to pick up and go off and restart their lives somewhere else in the wilderness. Rahab didn't expect this next attribute of God, though. One of the ultimate attributes of God is that this sets him apart, is a God of grace. Now, in the first book of Matthew, in the New Testament, chapter 1, starts by listing out Jesus' royal lineage. Here we find out what happened to Rahab after her life in Jericho. Verse 5, Salmon was the father of Boaz, whose mother was Rahab. Boaz was the father of Obed, whose mother was Ruth. Obed was the father of Jesse. Jesse was the father of King David. And the lineage goes on till it reaches Jesus Christ. See, the chapter reveals that she ends up marrying this guy named Salmon, who is actually one of the top leaders of the Israelites at the time. She married into royalty. Some scholars believe that Salmon was actually one of the two spies. That would make an awesome Hollywood movie. I mean, Salmon ends up falling in love with this woman because of her courage, her faith, and of course because she saved his life, right? But not only was Rahab's life spared from justice, she was accepted into the Israelite camp nation, but she was also elevated. Talk about a promotion. She moved from prostitute to royalty. Even with her tainted past, she was the first non-Jew in recorded history to become part of God's people. Because it's not what we've done that disqualifies us, it's who God is that qualifies us. It's not that what we've done that disqualifies us, it's who God is that qualifies us. Grace erases our shame. Grace is unfair favor, unfair love, an unfair gift. The fact that the Bible calls Rahab the prostitute all over Scripture most of the time is a reminder that God is a come-as-you-are God. Come as you are is more than just a cool Chase Oak saying that we have around here. It's a statement of God's grace. But not just when you first enter or when you first get to know him, but every single day of our lives, even when we disappoint him, sin against him, betray him again, or just fall short. See, God is more interested in who we're becoming than who we've been. Our past does not disqualify us from God's future. Because of his grace, we can be forgiven, restored, redeemed, renewed, and given a new life every single day. The old has passed, the new has come. Now for me, I don't really have this crazy story, crazy testimony like Rahab, nor even like a prodigal son testimony. I mean, I was pretty much overall a pretty decent kid, except I got suspended once, right? But what's crazy? If I were to rank my worst sins I've ever committed, my biggest mistakes, my biggest regrets, they all took place after I became a follower of Jesus. And what's even worse is they all happened during the times where I was in different Christian leadership roles, either as a student or as a volunteer or even as a pastor. I've dealt with explosive temper issues towards my family, especially when I became a new dad. Pride, lust, lack of forgiveness, the list goes on. I don't deserve to have the amazing wife that I have. I don't deserve to be a father of two precious daughters. I don't deserve to be in a role in this amazing church to help point people to Jesus. See, the older I get, the more God humbles me as I realize even more how much I need Jesus. How much I'm broken. I become less and less judgmental the more God humbles me. I'm walking evidence of God's grace. See, the reality is I'm a broken vessel. I am under construction till the day I die. I'm a messed up, imperfect person who believes in a perfect God full of grace and unfair, crazy love. So he still invites me to love him and love you in the midst of my weaknesses so that he gets all the credit. I constantly need him. Not just once for my salvation, but every single day to continually live by faith and take faith into action and trusting that his way is always better than my way. See, this is grace. Come as you are. God demonstrated his ultimate grace by sending his only son, Jesus Christ, to die on the cross instead of us to fulfill his justice. Not only did he die, he resurrected from the grave, demonstrating that he is the one and true God, powerful even over death. And therefore, he invites each one of us to a life of eternity with him when we put our faith in him. See, it isn't who we were that matters to God as much as who we're becoming through his transforming love and grace. And this is why I can confidently say that God is inviting every single one of us, not only to an eternal love relationship with him, but to play a significant role as his heroes in his mission of wanting to reconcile the world back to himself. This full of grace God, this unfair, crazy love God wants to rescue all, but it's our decision to have faith in him and to act upon this faith. See, this is what Rahab did. The information she received wasn't any different than what the rest of Jericho received. The difference was that she had faith and trusted that God is the God of the heavens above and the earth below, and acted upon that faith, becoming one of the heroes of our faith. And now it's our turn. Will you join me in a word of prayer? God, we humbly are here before you today, reminded that I am not God, we are not God, and you are. And yet we try to control our lives or go our own ways thinking that's the best, but God, remind us that to trust you, to believe you, and to act upon that belief because you love us. There's no sin too great for your forgiveness. There's no act too evil where you cannot restore and redeem. There's no person here that is unworthy that you did not die for. You love us, and that's not fair because we don't deserve it, but you still do. So God, thank you for your grace. Who are we without it? Thank you for sending your son, Jesus Christ, to die on the cross and rise again from the dead, and inviting each one of us to an eternal relationship with you. Regardless of what we feel about ourselves, you choose us to be one of your heroes in this world. So thank you. We're humbled, and we want to love you back through faith and action. Pray all this in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.